I can never tell when we're actually live, so I'm always on.
Yeah. Okay, we are.
Oh, we are actually.
Now, yes.
Now, yes, it has begun once again.
Yeah. We are doing the thing upon the internet. Hello.
We were just talking about customer service, weren't we, Lloyd? Hello.
We were, yeah. Customer service, and that it's for nerds.
It is for nerds, and thankfully, both of us as nerds no longer do customer service jobs, which is a good thing. But back in the day, my goodness me. Let's not talk about this because that's depressing. How are you, Lloyd?
I'm quite well, yeah. I got my vape fixed today, and now, because I was smoking cigarettes for the past week, which I remembered much more fondly, actually.
Yeah, same.
Than when I actually smoked them again. I was like, oh, this is actually fucking gross.
This is actually fucking gross. Yes,
Yeah.
it absolutely does do that.
Yeah.
It's like, why doesn't this taste of wild berries?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, I found myself going a lot,
Yeah.
weird fucking, it's just not as nice at all. And I remember it so fondly, outside in the morning with a coffee, smoking a cigarette. I remember it being beautiful.
Yeah.
But actually, it's fucking gross.
It is actually fucking gross. The other one, I think the only time that I could probably smoke tobacco now and not just cringe is if I've got a few drinks down me,
Yes.
down the pub on the Razza.
Yeah.
You've got a fag on at the same time, then that's okay. But
Yeah.
no, I'm with you. It's hard to go back, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Yeah, it was quite promising, actually, that I was keen to get off them again.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's sort of a thing that you think you will want to do forever, but then turns out you don't.
Speaking of things that we want to do forever, we're here once again to talk about role-playing games on the seminal RPG podcast, The Dice Cast. This is Campaignforge, which is an idea that we've had, which really will be exploring the different steps that it takes to construct a campaign. Now, last time we were conceptualizing
Yes.
what that campaign was going to be. And this session, we're going to talk about the session 0, which is how we start building that and introducing those ideas for conceptualization to the players, who will be the players in your game.
Yeah, it's for me now. I think the session 0 is one of the most important parts of getting the campaign together. We make these pretty ridiculous tomes of session 0 documents, and then I find. Oh, my audio is weird. Okay, I will fix it.
You're crystal clear to me.
Yeah, it's something to do with
Is it the OBS again?
OBS. Yeah, it's
Curses.
it does something. This should work. Okay.
Good job.
So yeah, we make these session 0 documents, and then we'll go through what we put in there. But when you do that at the end of this as a GM, you have this document that tells you what the players want to do, what their relationships are, what the important NPCs are, what the goals are, at all of the campaign. All of that stuff comes ready-made for you, and you can also go further in terms of making the players choose important locations and even talk about concepts of what they want in the game and stuff. And then you just have a huge amount of prep done before you start the game. And I've been sort of a proponent of it for a long time, the session 0 document, but especially Connor from Dice on Ice ran a game called Pariah, and in that we used a supplement called The Perilous Wilds, and that has this whole system for making a whole setting in the session 0 document. So you have the players pick make up locations, draw a squiggly map, all that stuff goes in before you even start. And it's an amazing way of getting your players to tell you straight up, I want to do this, I want to see this is what I'm interested in, rather than trying to piece that together yourself.
Yeah. Obviously it does a lot of the preparation for you. It also prepares the players. It also invests the players a lot, doesn't it? They're already telling you what they want, and that is effectively now a blueprint for you to reach the path of satisfaction for players and DMs alike.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing. Before we dive into it, I think we should talk about the session zero that we had the other night, because rather fortuitously, this is just lined up.
Yes.
We've had a session zero for the sequel campaign to Old Ways, which is a wonderful Song of Ice and Fire game that Lloyd has run for a good while now. How do you think that went? It was a little different to a lot of session zeros.
Yeah, it was so we have already run a campaign that finished, and then what we're doing is we're moving a game forward 50 years. And so we just sort of like took all the things we had, and then we thought about, I say we, the players thought about what they think would happen down the road, and then we took all those different ideas, smashed them together, and ended up with like a timeline that leads us to where we are now. I think it's so much better to do it that way, because it gives the players a lot of like agency about what they think would happen with their character. You also though need certain kinds of players who are willing to have tragedy occur to their character, and for not all to be smooth sailing. I think I think you could run into an issue where players are like, and then I conquered this place, and then I became the king of over here, and then I lived forever, but yeah, with the right players, like moving it on in that way was super interesting.
Yes, very useful as well, because I mean, the one thing that we've always said is that this game is generational. The main character of the game, you could argue, is the house itself. We're all affiliated with House Slate on the Stony Shore in the north, and a very logical yet very helpful thing for that session zero to achieve was the fact that we were able to work out what has, like you say, what's gone on. But as it's a sequel campaign, usually if you watch a film and there's a sequel to it, I've watched that film, now I know what happens in what will be set up for the next one or whatever. This one has obviously got a 50-year gap, which gives us freedom in the sense that we've got new characters, but it was also crucial that we know what has happened with all of the seeds that we have laid from the last game, because it's very much an empire building game, very much getting new territory, forging new alliances. So that's crucial as well for us to also understand everything that's led us to the next point, the next stepping stone.
Yeah, and beyond that, we also talked about what the challenges would be as a group, like what the problems will be. So we had discussed that maybe you'll be down in the south and you'll be fighting in the Civil War, and then we talked about maybe you'll be up north, and there was a lot of discussion about what would be the most interesting thing, sort of on a meta level. And it was very collaborative. We sort of figured that out together, and I think like that's one of the things in a session zero that maybe people don't think of so much if you're new to DMing or GMing in general, like that you're running the game, but actually it's everybody, and you're one brain, and you cannot come up with as many good ideas as six, so you should like mine as much as you can from the people who are in your game, because they're invested too, they want to see certain things, and then everyone is more enthused if it's something that they want to see, rather than you sort of deciding we're going to go to the south and you're going to fight in this thing, and then you arrive there and some of the players are like, but what about back home, and what about this thing, and what about
that's the most important lesson I think anyone could learn about running games, I think, and I think the session zero is just an excellent tool to explore that, the fact that you shouldn't have to do this alone, and you shouldn't be expected to know what to deliver to these players to satisfy them. Obviously you have to surprise them sometimes, which is great and fun, and in a lot of ways that could be helped by knowing what those players are after, because then you know how to sort of mix it up a little. But I think that is an incredibly important lesson to learn, and it starts with the session zero. Now, very quickly before we dive too further into it, what would you say are the parameters for requiring a session zero?
I mean, I think you can do it for anything. I would only really do it for a campaign of any length. If you're planning on doing something more than 1 or 2 sessions. We'll talk about hooks in a minute as well, because you can do that for one-shots as well. But I think like anything that's more than 1 session will benefit from a session zero. Even if it's only a small thing where you say, here are your characters, how do they know each other, what, how long have they been traveling together, what's one rivalry that one of them has or something, like that sort of stuff massively increases the feelings that you feel in the game. I think like arriving blind into a game with level 3 fighter is not the same as arriving into a game where the other characters, they know your character, you have history together, the setting, who the bad guy is, maybe, like all that stuff. You can do all of that, and it just makes it much easier to like jump right in to a game, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I find because if it's a one shot, we've said this before, but you obviously don't need a session 0 for a one shot. There's no point for it whatsoever. Just have 2 sessions in that case, or whatever. Pardon me.
I have a question from Caius. Hello, Caius.
We do.
Caius Corner. How binding are the decisions you make in session 0?
That's a good question. I don't think they should be too binding, should they? I think if you a lot of what we discover, what we enjoy in games, are often you find organically. Often, like an NPC will come along that you find interesting, or a problem will evolve naturally from the chaos of the dice, which is something you always have to remember is a factor. It doesn't matter how much planning or preparation you put into the game. If something goes wrong with the dice, then that can lead to a very different outcome. So it's
I think, like, for me, the session 0 is like the fuel. Sort of like gives you a good impression of what you and the players want from a game, and I think it's a really good place to go back and mine for ideas. So, like, usually I would ask players to, when they write the character, also come up with like a little bit of backstory, some NPCs that they're connected to, and like a short term and a medium term goal for a campaign. And so even if you don't stick to those things, and in old ways, some of the NPCs sort of vanished, that were made. They weren't a big deal. And then NPCs that weren't made in session 0 became really big deals and stuff. Like, that stuff changes. But I think you can always go back to it and see, okay, yeah, there was this character that was thought of, or there was this goal that somebody wants, or there was, but I don't think you should feel that you have to stick to it. I think the stuff that you should maybe stick to is if you put the question, and you should, what do you want from this game? What are, like, some scenes, scenarios, situations that you want from this game? If players are specific about those, then you should try and factor those in if you can, if it makes sense. But I think beyond that, it's a lot of just like, it's the fuel for the rest of it,
I think also it's important to say, whilst the session 0 document is made before session 1, that does not mean in any way that it stops being added to. As you say, Lloyd, the old ways, in fact, many of the session 0 docs that you've made, or that we've used over the years, continue to expand as the game continues. And as players think of new goals, they can, add different information into the doc. So it's there for everyone.
I think as well, like, you can, I just sent you the link again for some reason. Apologies.
It's okay.
You can do a thing with, like, which is, I guess we'll talk about later as well, but the idea that, like, between sessions, you're doing sessions 0.5, then 1.5, and then 2.5. That's what I often do, is, like, between sessions, when we finish a session, I'll say, what do you want to do next session? What do you want to achieve next session? And stuff like that. And it keeps the players in, firstly. Thinking about the game between games is nice.
Yes, very much so.
But also, it's easier for you as a GM then to prep, because you know what they want, My prep for Old Ways has generally been, like, a week before the game, I post, what do you want to do? Then I wait for those responses, and then the day of Old Ways, or a day before, I look at those things, and I copy and paste them into my prep notes, and I'm like, okay, done, like, there's a huge amount of, like, time saving that you can do that way.
This is strange, actually. I think Old Ways, or at least the Game of Thrones games, are the only ones that I might be missing one out, but it's added into the actual playing of the game in the sense that we have ravens that get delivered to us in the Old Ways game, news from abroad, news from different houses and from King's Landing that update us and give us new information as well. So not only is this document growing with lists of things that the characters want or things that they need to do, but there's also beneath that messages from characters in the game that are telling you things and giving you sparks of inspiration and hooks that you mentioned before, and this is a very useful device to use.
It's amazing. It's probably like, I think in the last year or so, the biggest change has been how much I invest in a session zero, both as a player and as a GM. Because I think you can just do so much fucking work for your game, and like so much setup is done through a session zero, much more than just like here's the setting, make your character. You can do so much more than that, I think,
Yeah, absolutely.
So we usually make a doc, a Google Doc, that has, I have one, here's one I made earlier, that has like the name of the game at the top, and then usually like a series of questions that we go through. Number one usually is like, here's the setting, if you need to explain that to people. And that doesn't mean like we're in Westeros. It means we're in the north of Westeros at the Stony Shore in the year blah 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 blah. Here's the principal sort of feeling of the world at the moment. Here's recent history, stuff like that. All of that stuff
relevant, specific information for what they'll need.
Exactly. That stuff makes a big difference. And then you go on to the characters. And usually this can be as busy as you want it to be, but I think the basic stuff is character's name, character's mechanics, whatever game you're playing, and some background. So by background, it's like, this character grew up, blah, 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 like a paragraph at most, usually. And then this is also a really good place to like insert, okay, now make one connection with one other character. That's your friend, one that's a rival, also create two NPCs that are related somehow to your character, one that's a friend, one that's a rival, something like that, and even if you did just that for your session zero, you'd already have so much shit. Like,
you have 3 sessions already done.
Yeah, if you did nothing else,
And it is nice because then other players can see existing connections between not only their characters but the characters they'll be playing alongside, which I think is always useful.
Yes.
So then your characters can notice these things about those characters and have discussions about them and disagreements with them about those goals or connections.
Absolutely.
It's all fuel. Yeah. What do you... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. I insist.
No, I was going to say, where do you think the inclusion of themes and pillars features within the campaign, the Session Zero doc?
It's a good question. It's either at the top or at the end. So I think either you put it in with the setting at the top and say, here's the feel of the game and here's what I want from it. And you might say, I want, intrigue, high politics, I want empire building, and I want themes of like, in old ways we have like new religion versus old religion. We have like personal like desires versus like duty, stuff like that.
Honor and duty, yeah.
You could put it there. Or often what I do is I put it at the bottom in a section that's usually called Our Story, in which I say, I want the game to have blah. I want it to have this. And if you want something else in the game, be it like different themes, be it like specific scenes, or like encounters, things like that, and put it in there,
Absolutely.
I think. Then we do usually places that are important. So this is generally, you can like, so it depends on how bare you're starting. So if you're starting with nothing, no map, no setting, no nothing, in this stage you can say, here's the world, create a region, everybody creates a region, put it somewhere on this map as a squiggle, and you might create in Connor's game I created the Barony of Weismund or whatever, all these different places, and you just put them onto this like squiggly map, and then everybody in the next step will add like a city, and everybody after that you'll add like a village and a site and stuff like that, and you can kind of get more and more specific until you have this like map full of stuff. That's if you're making your own setting or you are starting fresh. But if you're not and you're using an established setting, still you can do things like this where you can say, all right, everybody put down where your character's from, somewhere something important happened to them, where's that, and add like a landmark or like an interesting thing somewhere on the map. Which is what we did for the Isklof one shot for AdConline. I had that stuff so that everyone could see the stuff that they made, you know?
Yeah, that was really nice to be asked to include just even random little details about the location and stuff.
Yeah.
And in some things, like when you're playing Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, whatever, like some of the locations are already well known. Like obviously, while we're not there, we know we have relationships with Winterfell, for example. Like,
yeah,
it definitely helps to understand your place in the world of an existing setting when you know the well-known elements and where they are and where they relate to you. So I think that's quite important as well, particularly for such a diverse setting as Westeros as well, because there's a lot of holds and houses to keep track of in that setting in particular.
And I think it's the same in like in Faerun. It's such a big world,
yes, huge.
And I mean, we're doing this in Dragongrin, and that's a big world with lots of places.
It's a very big world.
You know? I also just realized that when you're talking about characters, you should also put in the mechanics information. So what level the characters should be, if there's any limitations on what you can play. So if you're not allowed to play as Marrow because you're rebels or something like that, then you put that in there. Or you're not allowed to play as the Lord because the Lord is me, the GM or something. Like you can do that all up there. Yeah.
So along with we're including what we want in the game, what pillars and themes we wish to explore. Let's talk now about lines and veils. This is in particular what we don't want to explore in the game, because I think that is equally important.
Yeah, so there's lots of different safety tools that you can use. The one that I like is lines and veils because it lets me sort of know in advance what to avoid. And a line is basically like, this is not in the game. I don't want to see it ever. You know, and preferably not even referenced, which is fine. And then veil is something that you kind of want to, like, it happens in the world. That's understandable, but I don't want it the game to focus on that. You know.
Yeah.
So. In the Game of Thrones game that I'm playing later tonight, we're Ironborn, and I didn't really want to focus on my character like taking salt wives. It's like not something I find particularly fun, you know.
Yeah.
And I know it's a part of the setting and whatever, but I didn't really want to be involved in that. And I didn't want to focus on it, you know. So stuff like that. I mean, generally you'll see like, you know, a lot of like any sexual content. People don't want that in their games. Totally understandable. That'll go in there. And then like things like, you know, overt, you know, graphic torture or other things like that people just don't want to see,
or animal death and things like that. And like obviously we're very lucky because we usually, when we're playing games, we're playing with a stable of people that we know well, we understand well, we share interests, and invariably we share those boundaries as well. This is particularly important, say for example you're playing online and you're playing with people that you haven't played before. You never know what they're used to from their home game or whatever. They might have expectations of things that you might have never considered. So it is sometimes important to be upfront with that, and at least then if it's on paper, people have read it and understood it, that's all that is required.
The other thing that we often do in game is we have like the traffic light system. So like, you can just put into the chat like, okay, we're approaching a yellow light for me, orange light for me, you know. So if it's something that you hadn't anticipated coming up but is quite uncomfortable for you, then you can just say, all right, we're approaching something that I'm not super into, and then the GM can sort of like veer away from it, you know. It's just good to be communicative as much as possible.
100%, yeah. And that doesn't just like. Quite glad you said that actually, because it doesn't just belong in a session zero. Obviously, that belongs at all times. Communication is key. Talk to your players and GM.
One of the things that like, there's an idea, and I had this idea when safety tools sort of first arrived, was that they will limit what I can do in my game, or I won't be able to tell the story that I want. It's actually like not the case at all. I think like there's a fear that like, oh, people will stop me telling the stories that I want. But it's like, if you're telling a story and it's making someone very uncomfortable, then like you shouldn't be telling that story. You know?
Maybe you shouldn't.
And I run like miserable, dark worlds, you know, and it doesn't affect the games hardly at all. It just means that like I don't focus on certain concepts or whatever. You don't have to. The world doesn't become less grim because you can't like have a focused scene on something that's awful. You know, there's plenty of other ways to be awful. Yeah, you know,
and in complete. You know, I don't think you had any interest in focusing on all like the like uncomfortable things anyway. To be honest, like that's never the point. But it was, the acknowledgement that those things are there, but to not explore them perhaps. But completely understand.
So safety tools, put them in your game.
Definitely put them in your game.
Put them in.
What next?
We have questions from Caius.
More questions from Caius.
Caius Corner. In old ways, we've all been playing together for a while and we know how we work, but if you don't know players, it's important to establish expectations of behavior. Super important. I think like not only in terms of behavior of like what you anticipate from players and how they treat other players at the table and stuff like that. Like that's one thing for sure, because scheduling is a big thing, and you know, like we have like Nico who like takes days off work sometimes to play games, so then if you can't arrive to that game suddenly, like that's very inconvenient. And so like when you decide you're going to be in a game, be in the game. But also I think on a different level, expectations of behavior means like if you're going to play in my game, my campaign, and I say I want you to generate the content that you want to play in, like I'm not going to do it for you. Then if we start the game and you're not generating content, then you're going to have a shit time, you know? Like you need to kind of know what that means and understand that like your character will have as many scenes as you want them to have and as you make them have, you know?
That is that's very important.
You know, that's a big difference in the way that like I would run games, for example, to other people, where like firstly the characters are not always together, you know? So that it's not like we're all in the same place anyway, so I can just chirp in when I want. Often there are characters who are miles apart, you know, and so you need to like decide, I want to do a scene with this thing, and just tell me that, you know. And we all know that in the games that we play, that's how we do it. And often you'll have players say, oh, I just want to do a quick scene with blah blah blah. Great, wonderful. But if that's new to you, or you are expecting to always be together in the same group, and you'll just sort of like pop your head in every now and then and make a comment, like that's a big disconnect. So it's super important to be clear about that, I think.
And also to say that isn't to say that you won't, the players won't be asked questions or or ask for input or be involved in certain scenes. But you're absolutely right. We definitely play in a style of gaming that you will definitely get out of it the more you put in, for sure. I think also it's important, and this is definitely established in the session zero, like players have always put in what their characters want to achieve. And invariably speaking, our interests align. So we're working as a constructive team whilst we're playing the game. Now, that's not to say that there isn't conflict between the characters where they disagree about things. But I think it's important to ensure that, for the most part, your wishes and your your ambitions basically align with everyone else's.
Yes.
Because when you're working as a group to achieve something in that style of game, at least, I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think like that's another thing that you can mention in the sessions here for sure is what's the goal of the game? What's your character's goals? And how are you going to like work towards them? You know? Because you can sort of end up a bit adrift, I think, if there's no overarching meta plot. Now this is pretty specific now to the games that I run, or like this is but most games would have like a plot, I think.
Yeah,
but
100%.
But if the case is that the players are a bit lost and they don't know what to do, like it's good to have in mind, okay, well they said they wanted to do this, so you can sort of push them in that direction a little bit, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're sort of drifting over to the territory into the actual gameplay now, aren't we? But all of those things that we do have mentioned so far do belong in that session zero as well. Those intentions, at least, and those shared ideals.
We have a question.
What else? We've got another question.
Have you ever been put off a game by a session zero? I haven't.
No, I haven't either.
I think it's
I don't think
very
so.
possible that you could be.
Yeah.
But I think I think we're both pretty we play with the same people a lot, so it's sort of like when you get into session zero, you know what to expect most of the time. I think that if you played with a bunch of random people and there was weird stuff in the session zero, that I would be like, nah, I'm good actually,
Yeah, because then it's just a list. They'll come up with a list of things that you're like, oh, actually, that doesn't really appeal to me. I'm all right.
Yeah,
I'll move on.
Pictures of red flags, and you're like, no, all right, thanks.
Yeah, I'll take my bow and leave, as it were. No, I think we're quite lucky like that. I think we just play who we want to play with, and invariably session zeros are things of excitement, things of anticipation.
Yes.
And by the end of a session zero, if you're not chomping at the bit to start playing in session one, then I think, well,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah,
hopefully you'll be excited after a session zero is basically what I'm saying.
One of the strengths I think of it for the way that we do it is that it really just builds hype a lot. It builds a lot of hype for the game, you put a lot of energy into it, and then you sort of get quite excited about the fact that I'll be playing this game and look at all the stuff, which is great, And I think we ended up using the session zero document to then become the campaign document, where we kept notes, and we had it's 100 pages now. I think it's massive, for Old Ways, with all the NPCs and notes from the sessions and all.
There's a family tree.
Yeah.
There's a whole family tree. It's insane.
Yeah, so it really becomes a living document that you use all the way through the campaign. And me as GM, I'm always mining it for stuff when I'm running the game,
It's definitely an opportunity for encouragement from fellow players as well, because take that example of Session Zero we did for the sequel campaign that's coming up. I had my real reservations about playing a descendant of my character from the first one, because I thought, is that a bit too on the nose? You hear jokes about characters dying in D&D and then their son or their brother or their second cousin showing up, so that is ingrained within me. I'm like, oh, is that but I think because I was that idea was supported by the players, and that this is a game about generations and things like that, I was encouraged to just go with my gut, and that's all thanks to a session zero.
Yep.
Is there anything else that we can think of that we would include? Because I think we should start applying this to our Dragon Grin template.
Yes. I think that's probably most of it. Let me open up this doc again and have a quick look and make sure. But I think that's everything.
Do you have one that I can have a look at?
Oh, yes.
Or one that you're looking at in particular? Then I'll know what you're seeing.
Let me see.
For those of you that missed last episode, we were chatting with Barker of Abtab fame, and and he shared with us some excellent inspiration ideas using his amazing story wheel. And in a discussion with him, we kind of explored what we would want from a Dragon Grin game. For those who don't know, Dragon Grin is a setting made by Absolute Tabletop, and it is effectively a world where the bad guys have won. It's what if Sauron had won and the world is plunged into darkness and tyranny. And naturally, we find that particular idea quite appealing. So that's why we've decided to... I need access, please, Lloyd.
Oh, good God.
It's locked.
How humiliating. Oh, my goodness.
It was me trying to fill time. I'll just talk about Dragon Grin whilst I'm desperately trying to open this document.
It's my first time on the internet, it must be.
Now, I for one, I don't know if I'm speaking for you or not, Lloyd, but when it comes to Dragon Grin as a setting, I have to say I think I find the bad guys far more
Me too. Yeah.
interesting than the good guys, because there aren't many good guys, to be fair. So probability obviously helps in that regard, but we like the marrow, don't we?
I love them. It's you get to play a fantasy Roman legion. That's way up my alley.
Exactly.
I think like the thing that I would do if I was going to start a Dragon Grin campaign myself is I would run a Marrow mercenary company game. So you are whatever, deserters, sellswords, most of you from the Marrow Legion, others are just like wandering in or whatever, and you're a mercenary company, figure it out, you know. We have a question.
Oh, nice.
How would you quickly pitch the need of Session Zero to someone who's never used it? From Nicholas.
How do we pitch it for someone who has never used it?
I would say, you know that awkward first session that you have where you meet in the tavern and all the characters have to like do their edgy introduction, and they have to do this like, well, we should travel together, even though you've all agreed to that already. Everyone knows what the game is going to be. You can cut out that whole stupid session, you know? You can cut that out entirely. You can create friendships and backgrounds before you start the game, and you can, most importantly, know what you want to do and know what the players want to do before you ever like roll a dice, which I think is super valuable.
I recently snuck a Session Zero upon my home group recently, because when I play on my home group, it's very much just standard D&D. We have a laugh with it. It's great fun. But they are not used to the Session Zero. They're used to the Session Zero effectively being, you show up with your character sheet.
Yes.
You roll your stats, or you determine your stats, you pick your skills, you pick your feat or whatever, and off you go. That's Session Zero. But this time, I was asking them more questions. But I thought, you know what, let's see how they respond to this. And it was great. It really was. And I think genuinely they enjoyed it. And I think, pitching them these questions whilst people that are familiar with perhaps role-playing games but not familiar with the Session Zero, just hurl those questions in their direction while they're determining their ability scores.
Yes.
Taking the emphasis from the number generation and more into what their position is as characters in the setting you're about to explore.
I think like so valuable is just the idea that like my character, Blorg the Orc, like, you know, I'm from, you know, the like awful wastes or whatever. That's where I'm from, and I grew up there as in an orc tribe. But 4 years ago, I met Flimflam the gnome, and we encountered a chimera, and we managed to work together to defeat it. And ever since, we've been friends because Flimflam saved my life, and I owe them. You know, it's sort of like taking the bonds, flaws, ideals, or whatever from standard 5e, and just like rather than rolling it randomly, picking something cool and deciding it, you know, which I just think is like way better and it's easy.
Even
in
that basic introduction of how two characters met, you've shown how the orc may have learned to become more understanding of like gnomes. So Flim Flam was that for him, like a gateway into understanding a different race and a different culture. Like,
it's so simple to do. You know, it's really like not that much work to put in that like, what was that, 30 seconds of effort to, you know, and you should give it more time than that, but like you can really like very quickly come up with something that like makes sense and ties your characters together, you know.
I definitely want to play a game in the awful wastes. It's an awful waste. Excellent.
Okay,
excellent.
So I wonder, can I put this on
screen? That's a good idea. Screen share. Is that a thing still?
Everyone can watch me flounder around in OBS for a minute. Nope. Not that.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
No, but it's actually this. Aha.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So this is what we got. This is the name of our game. And these are just like the very basic things. I would probably have much more than this if I was making Session Zero. I'd have way more stuff. But this is like probably the minimum level that I would go for, I think, if I was doing a Session Zero. So this first section, I would put in like, so character level, restrictions, if there are any. So in our case, you must be a deserted Marrow Legionary. Right. One of the things that we've sort of decided about our game. We'll say 3 or something. And that's probably it in terms of like the mechanics. Oh, you probably want to put in like roll 3 or 3D. Oh my god, 3d6 or 27 point by or whatever it is. Average HP, all that sort of stuff that you have to put in when you make a character. Players will
that
ask.
is literally all you need for them to go away and make their characters for sure. Yeah.
So then we have list your character's name, their class, their background, throw in a picture, which is always nice. It's always nice to like fill these documents with art.
Yes.
If you can, to give an impression of the world and of the people. And then we have add some kind of connection relationship to another character. How do you know them and where did you meet? Basic level stuff, but you can also add in like one other character once saved you. Who was it and when? Right, something like that. Or one that I saw M do in the Spire game was write down 3 rumors about you, only one of which is true. You know,
that's good.
Which is great.
Yeah, I like that very
it can,
much.
Like, give your character a reputation before you start the game. Things like that. Like, there's lots of stuff that you can do with this section here. I'm running a Greek game coming up, and one of the things that I put in was epithet. So this is from the game Agon, where like your character is like bright-eyed, like Aristarchus, right? So you have this like pre-name, like, and that is sort of like a description of your character and what they're good at, and so you can end up with like when you make a skill check that relates to that, you can call on that to get advantage or something, right?
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I like that very much.
That's
actually a good way to introduce the Session Zero to people that wouldn't know, because that right there is 2 truths and a lie, which is a very popular game to play. Yeah, an icebreaker game for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, this, I mean, you can get mad with this, and I think like it's worth doing as well. Like you can really put a lot of work into this particular section, and you'll end up with like pretty fleshed out characters before you start. Now, some people want to discover their character in play, and I think you still do, but this
You
gives
100% do. Yeah.
But this gives you like relationships with other people, and some like by background, I don't mean like write a page and a half about your character where they grew up. I mean like.
Please don't do that.
No, I will not read it, you know?
Don't do it.
But what I do mean is sort of like, okay, this is my character, here are some traits about them, and this is, you know, their position in the world or whatever. That stuff is really helpful, I find.
100%.
Okay, so then, we have this places of note area, and this is where we all would like put an important place, so... I don't know, in Dragon Grin, we'll put in...
Well, I mean, we're in Dragon Grin. What area are we going to have this game begin in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know enough about Dragon Grin without looking at the book to tell you that.
Same. Is Uldane like the Wastes?
I think so. There's also the Fey Grave, which is...
Fey Grave is...
the bit where underneath the tree... underneath the tree.
Underneath the tree!
You'd think that... we would have looked this up before we started.
Yeah, we would.
And yet, here we are. We're going to get Tim in on one of these.
Let's go to the chat. If anyone's familiar with Dragon Grin, give us a suggestion of one of the areas that this game could start in, given that we will be playing Marrow Legionnaires. We shouldn't wait for that. we can't depend on it. It might never come.
Okay, so this is where you would put like the major area. So let's say we're going with Feygrave.
Yeah.
Then you'd also put in so I would usually write the names of the players. So I'd put in Rob, Lloyd, Nico, because he's in every game that I run, and Keel, because he's in every game that I run. Right, and so then I would like. Basically, this is, as a GM, a really good way to make people write something, because they see their name and they see that it's empty and they know that they have to do something, you know? It's a good way to sort of galvanize people into doing something.
Prompt input, yes. Let's think of some other areas inside Feygrave then. So if we're last session we agreed that it might be a good idea for us to begin as recent deserters, so we don't have to we don't have to railroad like an event that deserts, makes them desert. But I mean, maybe the barracks or the former barracks is a location.
Yeah,
or the new barracks, like the place that they're hiding, their hiding place or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got like the actual Marrow headquarters or whatever in this area, right?
Yeah.
And then something random like a site. So there's a hidden glade deep in the woods.
Sure.
With a unicorn or some shit, you know, like
Yep.
anything can go here. And you're talking about like, so this is the area where you sort of go area, which would be like a whole region. So a hidden glade wouldn't be enough. It would be like a deeply magical forest on the southern edge or something, you know, and you'd give it a name or something as well.
Yeah. And as it's Dragon Grin, let's throw the Bleak in there somewhere. So it's an area that is being corrupted by the storms of the Bleak or something. Bleak Storm.
The northern, along the northern border where a battle happened 1 month ago, something like that. So then you have this stuff. You've got a couple of places or whatever, and everyone should add 2 in this sort of section.
Yeah.
And already you've got like a lot of stuff. Now this section up here will take up like several pages worth of stuff because everyone's got to put in all their character stuff. Then you'll have this, which will be a little bit smaller, but ideally the players will add 2 things each. And then you've got personal places. So this probably should be number 2 rather than number 3, but this is where you put your character's home, like where they were born, where they grew up, and a significant place. So
yeah.
In, you know, my character's case, that might be I grew up in where do the Crucians live? That place.
I was just about to say, yeah.
Sphere?
Within a Crucian household,
Yeah.
perhaps you'd have to put where it is
Yeah.
positioned. Yeah.
And then an important place for me was the Castellum in which I learned to be a legionary, and that was in, you know, Sphere Below or something. Like it could be anywhere. These 2 places, you know, on the map that your character has been and knows about is really useful. It's also important, like it's useful for the GM then to like pull those back in and get you sort of thinking about those places. And if you ever visit there, they have a good impression of like, okay, this is important to the character. I should put extra effort in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Important people. So this is super handy. This is usually people who are like related in some way to your character. And this is where the players can create baddies as well. It doesn't have to always be like a friend. It can be for sure. It can be like, oh, I know this old crone that lives in the woods, and she saved me once when I was attacked by a displacer beast and nursed me back to health, and I owe her, you know. But then also you can have, there is a rival Marrow Centurion who, you know, gave me endless shit when I was training, and now I hate him and he hates me, and
he's now in a position of authority above me or something. Yeah, something
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
You know, and so it's usually good to have players like create one thing that's helpful to them and one that is actively against them, so that you end up with like a nice balance of things to draw on, people to draw on. Then we have our stories. So this is where I would say I, the GM, want this game to feature blah, 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 blah. So in this game, I would want it to feature skirmishes, mercenary work. I would want it to feature like bounty hunting. I would want it to feature not having enough stuff, but needing it.
Yeah.
Scarcity, I guess, you know, journeys through the wilderness, all that shit. I'd write all that down, and then I would put the players' names underneath here again, and I would tell them to tell me what they want from the game. And that could be...
also, yeah, I was just going to say, it's also nice, like, as we discussed, I think, last time, about including short bits of fiction and things like that when we do interest posts. You know, we have, like, we write out a scene that's kind of indicative of what we want the campaign to be.
Yes.
It's nice to have, like, little excerpts of that sort of thing in this area as well, I find.
Totally.
Like a blurb or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. The more in fiction that you can make this, the better, I think.
Yeah.
Like this again is like a very basic one. That's just useful for like, here's the basic idea of what stuff you can include. But as I said, we would have maybe 10 points as opposed to 4 or 5 of things for people to add to. And this is where players can say anything from as vague as, I'd like the game to feature the theme of, you know, honor versus personal desire, or it can be, I want a scene where we have dinner with the bad guy, or it can be, I want to fight a hydra, or it can be anything, you know, any specific or vague thing that you as a player want to see in a game, put it in here. It's all useful to the GM, no matter how vague or specific you think it is. Like, it tells the GM the kind of thing that you're into. And then we have lines and veils, which we talked about, and that would be the end. That's it. The whole thing.
That is the whole thing. I think I've got a name for this Dragon Grin campaign, because I think it is important to name. To have, like, obviously we talk about getting good art when you do your interest post and writing something cool. I think it's good to have like a cool name.
Yes.
I think something like Dragon Grin Renegades.
Ooh, yeah. Every time I spell Dragon Grin, I think I've spelled it wrong.
Same. I always wonder if it's because, you know, I think weirdly, I think Tim and James used to spell, I could just be making this up, but I swear they used to spell it with 2 N's at the end.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think maybe they stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, so you'll end up with this. Now, I would, you know, because I'm a nerd, I would go into Photoshop and make a little image and put
Make
that
a
here
little
instead.
thing, yeah.
You know, and I would do that for each of these, like, headings. The more, like, the prettier and more interesting you can make this document, like, it'll pay off. The more effort you put in as a GM, the more, like, effort the players will put in, I find. So, like, it's worth putting a bit of work into it. And, you know, these are very basic sort of headings and ideas and stuff, but you can really expand on these ad infinitum if you want. You know, you can make it as big and detailed as you want. I know that, like, when M did the Spire one, it was like many pages of stuff, but it paid off massively, because when we started the game, we all sort of knew a lot about each other, about our characters, about the setting, and we gave lots of information to M about what we think is interesting about the setting, which is, you know, super useful.
And we've spent just under an hour working on this, and already that's a campaign.
Yeah. Oh, easily. Yep.
Easy.
The one other thing that I would talk about, actually, which maybe should go in here somewhere.
Sure.
Oh no! Don't do that. One.
Oh, I hate it when it does that. I can't help. I can't help.
There we go. Okay. All right. So this is something that we used to do a lot in one shots, and I think it could still be useful in session 0, where you go A, B. Trying to tell you, and you say, okay, when you were a child, the centurion Flammus Dangus saved you from drowning. Something like this. Now, this is just the first sentence of this. It should be a little bit of a paragraph where you explain some way that ties them directly into the game. So, if your game is about this specific situation where you are deserters from the Legion, it would be cool to be like, okay, you have always been a renegade agent working for the Undying Light, and you were given this mission, 6 years ago when you signed up to infiltrate the Legion. That's your hook. And then another one could be, you were raised in a Crucian household of military might, and you've always been a true believer in the Dismembered Lord, but then this particular incident happened, and now you have doubts or whatever. You can put these little hooks, and everyone will pick one. It's good to also include other players in the hooks if you can, and then everybody has a sort of like immediate jump in to the game. And it's a good way to also like tie your players in with other characters in the world,
Yeah. It invests them as well.
Yeah.
They immediately have something that links them to the events that will shortly proceed. Like it's Yeah, it puts them right in there already. Both feet first.
Yep,
We did it. Let's
we did
I
it.
think we have some questions left, I believe. We have some over on Facebook. As ever, here on the Dice Cast, the day that we are about to record, we post into the absolute tabletop group on Facebook, so you can catch us where we post things
Oh yeah, well, you have
and
questions
we
over
ask
there.
for questions. We do
Forgot
have
about
some
that.
questions, but I have lost the post. Ah, here we are. Right, questions here. Okay, so first of all, we have Connor Davis, who says, do you have any cunning tricks for weaving players' backstories and goals together that were given in session zero?
Any cunning
So,
tricks?
cunning tricks. Well, I
Yeah.
think if you follow what we've just done, you have the work kind of done for you in a lot of senses. Because one, it's open for players to say, well, if someone's put that in their hook or in their character information that they have a particular relationship or a particular goal, then I think you've already laid the groundwork in the session zero. I would say, because he's saying that this is after, so weaving these backstories that were given in session zero. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, I think like it happened sort of organically in old ways where you decided you were going to be the Lord and then Jeff decided he was going to be your knight
Yes.
and that tied together. And I think that sort of just happens organically. I think it's also, you can sort of force that by saying, create a bond with one other PC, create a rivalry with one other PC.
Yeah.
Very simply, you can do that, and then everyone has a relationship with everybody else. Fiasco is a really good model for that, where you can sort of, if every player has a relationship with at least two other players, everyone's connected already, to some
Yeah.
extent. And I think that's a good way of doing it.
The and linking I think NPCs are probably the best one of the best tools for this as well, because if you have an NPC that is in some way linked to the character's backstory or is linked to those goals and it aligns with the overall mission that everyone else in the game is approaching, um that is a good way. Say, for example, a character recognizes an emissary that has been sent to broker a deal with your characters and another faction, whatever. The fact that that character will then know you from your backstory or whatever, then links it into
Yeah.
the current dilemma, which I think is the best way to do it. If it's like a side quest, it's not
Yeah.
it's not as relevant to the other players, and I think that's the most important thing. I think as long as you can weave those elements of backstory and goals for one player into the story that affects everyone, I think that is the best way to explore those things.
Yeah. I think you can encourage players as well to do that. So when you're thinking of your bonds and your goals, like how do they relate to the story we're telling? Because having all your bonds be in the village you grew up in and you're not going to go there is not very useful. So having them related to because you should talk about where you're going to go and what you're going to do as well.
Yeah.
um, Nicholas asks, do you always have an ending in mind when playing a campaign, or does that ending come organically when it becomes obvious that there's no more sessions after that one?
Well, that happened quite recently, didn't it?
Yeah, I had a campaign that ended without my say so. I don't always have an ending in mind. I usually have, well, nowadays, depending on the game, I'll have a number of sessions in mind, vaguely. But it depends on the game. Sometimes you start playing a game and you're like, actually, this is fucking rad and I don't want to stop playing it. And you just don't. I think like I think it's easier to have an ending in mind when you're playing a game that has a plot, like an overarching plot.
Yeah.
If the plot is defeat the big bad guy, then it ends when you do that.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell when that's going to happen. Although sometimes that extends, given if we give it Against the Shadow
Yes.
an example of this, we've decided that we were going to help particular people that are trapped in Helm's Deep in Rohan, but that's actually added an additional session to what you, Lloyd, had anticipated happening. So it's nice that you have like a rough idea, but as long as it remains a rough idea, because I think the flexibility of a game is is probably the most crucial thing to keep hold of for sure.
Yeah,
but it's
like adjust it as you go. I think you're improvising most sessions anyway, and you can improvise when the game will end. I think as well. Sometimes a game just has a natural end point, like what happened with Old Ways. There was just like, well, this is a clear point where we can end the game. And sometimes you can sort of decide it, like it's going to be this final encounter, and that'll be the end. But yeah, I don't always have it in mind. I don't think.
It's interesting as well because I think it almost reminded me of a Total War ending where you have certain victory conditions.
Yeah.
That you meet in a campaign, and you're like, well, you've done everything that you set out to achieve, and everything for good or ill has fallen into place.
Yes.
Which is why it's nice then that there is still an option then to continue it in a sequel campaign as well. So it's always nice to consider that. Like, can something go beyond what you've envisioned as an ending? Is that really the end? Because it's not the end of House Slate.
No. Yeah.
Against the Shadow hopefully won't be the end of Middle Earth. We still have to find out.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
You never know, do you?
Yeah.
So it's it's interesting to consider that for sure. Let's see. Who else do we have?
We have Alan.
Alan, yes.
What are some open-ended questions you can use in Session Zero to get players to expand on their characters outside the mechanics aspect? How can you use these questions to world build, create plot hooks, create bonds with other PCs, NPCs, discover motivations that the GM can use to steer the story, etc.?
See this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of that has sort of come up in what we've been talking about already. And in
good questions, though, for sure.
Yes.
Good things to consider. Very good things to consider.
I think you can use the characters to world build specifically through like creating places, but also through like their background. They can say, I was at the battle of blah blah blah, and they make up a battle, or I was at the, like you can do a lot of that stuff too. I would encourage, like, if it's a setting you're making yourself, to just have players make shit up with no just say, you tell me what happened, and where it is or whatever. That's fine. I think in a more focused setting, or one that already exists, they can world build through naming places that already exist or whatever in a different way. But
it's so useful for everyone who's going to be involved in the game everyone to see this document, because it provides an even footing, it provides equal understanding, and it provides an insight into how you as the GM are envisioning this, envisioning how these plot hooks are going to take an effect on these characters, envisioning what, or rather being able to see what your players have added to the document, so that everyone's on the same understanding, everyone's at the same place. Which is crucial. Again, another reason why Session Zeros are the way to go. And I think we have another question from Alan Holloway as well, which is, what, if any, are some aspects of the game you as the GM have to have prior to Session Zero? Maybe like timing and schedule, what you are including or excluding per the system setting. Is there a predetermined area, town, etc.? In the setting you will be using, what is some common knowledge the players might know about the area, NPCs, history, and stuff?
Yep, we've also talked about most of that already in the doc. I think timing and schedule we didn't talk about so much, but
that is a very important thing to remind everyone about, though. Yes, 100%. You have to make sure that before, I think, the Session Zero doc even goes up, that everyone is invested and available.
Yeah, I think particularly if you're playing all online, you'll often have players who are all over the world, and so choosing a time that fits is really important. A time that can reliably be made by everybody. I also think, like, for me, the most essential part of scheduling is to choose days that are set, as opposed to trying to, we'll play once a month. Yeah, good luck with that,
Yeah.
You need to say it's going to be Mondays, it's going to be at this time, and you should put that in your interest post before you do a Session Zero, so that everybody, before they even come to the interest of the game, knows that they can make those times and dates and stuff. I think it's super important. or you'll just frustrate yourself. I think the thing here is that's interesting is common knowledge. Like
that's what I was about to. Yes, I'm about to say yes.
We talk a little bit about that at the start, like with the setting, but actually it's super good to be clear about who certain characters are in the world. Like in the Iskoff one shot, I talked about Uthal Colbrander, who's like the villain, I guess. And just so everyone was sort of on the same page about that, like who this person is, what they have done, like so you know when someone mentions it in game to you that you're not like, hey, who's that? You know?
Who's that?
Yeah.
Although your character might be who's that, but yes. the thing is that when everyone's looking at this document, when they see everything that players have had that input in, that is already common knowledge because it's literally there for everyone to see. Like all of the information is not just there for the GM to understand how to run the game. It's for the players to understand how to interact and be involved in the game. So that becomes common knowledge too. And Uthal Colbrander is blatantly the villain, Lloyd. Yes. You said, I guess. Of course he's the villain.
We played on his side. He's actually quite a nice guy, I guess, you know?
Yeah, bet he is.
He's the bad guy if you're in the South. Yeah.
He's a nightmare. I love him, but he's a nightmare. Do we have anything else in the chat, or have we
have a quick check?
We've got Kai's adding a few extra things.
He said, to end Against the Shadow correctly, I think we should have about 3 sessions of self-indulgent goodbyes after the climax.
Absolutely, yes. We'll have about 7 different endings for sure. Yeah, that has to be done.
We
have said that there's going to be an epilogue session, right? You did say that, right?
You can lie in the bed and just go, oh.
Oh, yeah. And he forgets Legolas's name. He's like, Gimli!
You,
you, I guess.
I don't think
we didn't really talk.
Yeah,
we didn't really.
I think they barely speak in the whole thing. Legolas and
I don't think they have a shared line of dialogue. No.
Weird.
They're all busy, very busy.
Right. That's it, I think.
There we are. What's next, do we reckon, Lloyd?
It's a good question.
Forge.
I would say the next thing would be prepping your first session.
Yes. Well, there you have it. Viewers, next time on the Dyer's Cast, we will be exploring how to prepare your first session with the help of the Session Zero documents. Is that document available, Lloyd?
I will make it available.
I will make it available.
I will make it available. I'll put it in the bit below.
Excellent. Well,
the bit below.
A bit below.
Cool.
Thank you very much for watching.
Yeah. Bye.